Welcome to our Woodhaven rollback nights, and we're the Woodhaven Cultural Historical Society. For those of you here for the first time with us, we were founded in 1992, and there's our email address down at the bottom, woodhavenhistory@gmail.com. That's where to get in touch with us, please. If you got anything you think we'd be interested in, or you just want to say hello, we're always there. Welcome to 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. Glad to see you all back. Hope you had a good time. It was a weird New Year, right? It was just an odd one, but we made it to 2021. So, like I said, we're going to be talking about houses later, but I had promised to talk about this a couple of weeks ago. Eddie Seawall was looking forward to this one, and because I couldn't really do it justice, and I really didn't want to do it right before Christmas, and there's the story of this gentleman here, Professor Kotkov, who was the victim of a very, very notorious and a high profile murder case right here in Woodhaven 100 years ago. And these kind of exercises are going to help us, because these are going to be topics. They might not be whole chapters, but they will be mentioned or covered in our book that we're working on. So by revisiting some of these topics, it's helpful to us. Professor Kotkov, we're gonna start off with this headline right here. Long Island Daily Press. This is February 24th, 1921. So this is the 100th anniversary of this. And there's the headline: Woodhaven man beaten with iron bar dying. It's a very dramatic headline. And you can see right here, bandits beat and rob over here on the right. Bandits beat and rob teacher of philosophy in lot near his home. Dr. Wilfred P. Kotkov, member of the faculty of Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan, was attacked in a Woodhaven lot. So this is 100 years ago. And there's going to be parts of this. It's almost like a silent movie a little bit, where there's going to be these captions. I'll read them for you, but you can probably read faster than me. But this is Wilfred Kotkov, 36 years old, a school teacher, was beaten with an iron bedpost early today by one of four men who were apparently robbers. They attacked him in a vacant lot on Liberty Avenue between Boyd and Benedict Avenues in Woodhaven. Now, right there, I know a lot of you are going to be thinking I'm daft or out of my mind, because it says Liberty Avenue in Woodhaven. And that's because Woodhaven, originally stretched much further south than it came to be, even just shortly after this. But in the early 1920s, that section, which is now known as Ozone Park, that section was known as Woodhaven. It was part of Woodhaven. Ozone Park was part of Woodhaven before it broke off and formed its own family. Examination at Mary Immaculate Hospital, Jamaica, showed that Mr. Kotkov has multiple fractures of the skull and will all probability die. So you see here that four men are arrested, and it's a very, very quick arrest. Alleged bandits held without bail for Kotkov's death. The newspapers in those days were very dramatic, very flowery, but very descriptive, and they're interesting to read. Cries for help were heard by Patrolman George Burling of the Richmond Hill Precinct. That's the 102, I guess, right? On duty several blocks away. When the officer neared the lot, he saw a prostrate form in the snow and four men hurriedly leaving the scene. Burling pursued two of the men, who said they knew nothing about the attack on the teacher. The two were Italians, and the patrolman noticed one had blood on his right hand. Nearby was a section of iron bedpost on which there was also blood. So a thing here, talking about more lights for Dark Park, where Kotkov was slain. This is an article actually from probably about a year after the incident. And the the people of the Liberty Heights Civic Association, the Woodhaven division, they were calling for lights right where Kotkov was slain. And that's going to come into this, you'll see. Dr. Kotkov, who's been for several years a member of the seminary faculty, being a teacher of philosophy and the Talmud, has been conducting evening classes, and he was on his way home from one of these sessions when he was attacked. He resides on Benedict Avenue in Woodhaven. Benedict Avenue, remember, all the streets had names before they switched over. Benedict Avenue became 87th Street. So let's see what happened on the walk home. These are the steps that he walked down. These, the 88th Street station these days for the A train. And this train was fairly new, probably about 5 or 6 years old at the time that he was taking this from the city. And what an advancement that was, how it just expanded people's lives, where now you had someone here all the way out in Queens commuting to Manhattan. And that's the intersection. This is from the 1940s, but 1940s, this is less than 20 years after the attack happened. And there's the corner you see over there on the left, the stairs. And there it is, a close-up of what it looks like today. Again, I know this is Ozone Park, but this was Woodhaven, and it is part of Woodhaven history. There are the steps, 1940s, and it's under these steps, actually, that these men waited. I think the word they used in the paper was skulked. That's a good word. I like words like that they're descriptive and they sound good too. Skulk. Skulk's a bad thing. When someone's skulking, they're up to no good. So let's take a look now at the map here. And this is where you're going to see some of the tools that we use to kind of recreate this. It's some fun stuff. This is a map here where you can see over here you've got Liberty Avenue here. You've got 89th Street, 88th Street, 87th Street, 87th Street, Benedict Avenue, 88 Boyd. Right over here, this is where the that's where the train station is. That's where the train station is. So that's where he gets off, right where that red X is, at the corner of Boyd and Liberty. And here's where his house is. It's not far. He doesn't have a far walk to go. It's just zip. And this is his house. This is from 1940. But this is his house. And here's his house today. It's a beautiful little home, and all he wanted to do was get back home. So we're back at the map, and we see the X where he gets off the train, and the little red square where his home is. And now this is fascinating. This is the New York City does some things. Listen, I'm critical of the city sometimes, but one of the things they do really good. This map is terrific. They have overhead views of New York City. Like those satellite views. And you can go to their site and you can pull up the screen and you can go back like 1996, 1994, 1992, and you can see the aerial shots. But they also include 1951 and 1924. These are aerial shots that were taken from like a blimp or airplanes, I guess. And it really is terrific because it gives you a way of seeing how things change, and you find a lot of things on these, even though it's not really all that clear. It's clear enough. So we're looking at the same section here, except now we're looking at this. This is a shot from 1924. This is 3 years after the murder. So we're like really close at looking at a picture of of the crime scene and around there. And we're going to see how it plays into this. Again, the X where he gets off, and there's his red square in the house. So when we transfer that over here, we can see how far he has to walk. And you can even see there's the train station there, right? There it is. You can see there's the train line. And here he's going to come. He's going to be from here, and he's got to get there. Now, normally, if you got off the train, you would walk along Liberty, right? And then you would walk down and walk to your house. That's how you'd get home. But look at what you see there in the 1924 picture. You see a bunch of nothing right here. You see an empty lot. And it's through that lot that Professor Kotkov is going to walk. He's going to walk through that lot to get home. It's a shortcut. In fact, it even says in that article I was posted up before, where the professor resides on Benedict Avenue, Woodhaven, at Liberty Avenue between Boyd and Benedict Avenues, there is a large vacant lot, much used as a shortcut by residents in the neighborhood. So this was a shortcut. This is the one that civic organization was saying, hey, it's got to be better lit. So now you see what's happening here, and it's right in that lot that Professor Kotkov is attacked. That's the lot today. You've got that blue corner. I guess it's some kind of a garage. Those of you still in the area, if you're down this way, you recognize it. That's where the lot was, right there. In fact, 1940s, there was a building right next to it, and you can see the lot was still empty there in the 1940s. Even though it looks like some building had been done on it, but it was still empty there. So this is where the professor was attacked, and he went to the hospital, and his skull was fractured. He was very, very badly beaten, and he hung on for 2 or 3 days, and eventually, they had an operation, and they thought he was getting better, but he took a turn for the worse. And it says here he's also a regular lecturer on, and I had never seen this word before. It's down here. And I looked it up on YouTube to hear how to pronounce it, so I sound smart. Philology, 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 and that's a study of languages. And sure enough, it comes down here at the bottom. It says Dr. Kotkov is an accomplished linguist. So. Eventually, he succumbs to his injuries, and he dies. Dr. Wilfred Phineas Kotkov. All right. Back to the officer. He pursued 2 of the men who said they knew nothing about the attack. The 2 were Italians. You notice they keep mentioning that, right? The newspapers there were back in that era were not politically correct, and sometimes they're a little uncomfortable to read. But anyway, the 2 were Italians, and the patrolman noticed one had blood on his right hand. Nearby was the section of iron bedpost on which there was also blood. The policeman, at the point of his revolver, this is wacky, this part, ordered the Italians to assist in carrying the unconscious and bleeding man to a nearby residence, from which a hurry call for an ambulance was sent to Mary Immaculate Hospital in Jamaica. So the policeman sees this guy, he's got blood on his hands, he sees a bloody pipe nearby, and he orders them to pick up the guy and carry him the guy the policeman thinks that these guys just beat. That's a little odd. That wouldn't fly nowadays, right? That's certainly tampering with the crime scene. At the same time, also, word was sent to the station house at Richmond Hill for detectives and officers to search for the 2 other Italians wanted in connection with the holdup. Here we go. Hold 4 men for murder in Woodhaven. This is a few days afterwards. The 4 men are Peter Nunziata, 17 years old, from Brooklyn. Joseph Alfano from the same street in Brooklyn, 22 years old. Frank Cassessa, 22 years old, 8th Street in Brooklyn. And Alphonse Verona from Water Street, Woodhaven. So after the arrests are made, there was a tremendous outcry in the press over this, over the violence of the attack, over the man who was attacked, who was a teacher, and by all accounts, very mild-mannered, an innocent citizen, just attacked and beaten brutally and robbed. This is a typical editorial of that week, in which the papers were calling for swift justice, not just justice, but swift, fast justice. It says here, on Monday, indictments for murder in the first degree were returned against 4 suspects by the grand jury. This is the quickest indictment on this charge ever returned in Queens County. And they go on to say there's only one penalty adequate as punishment in this case. That is the electric chair. And I tell you, the cries were fierce, and they were having an effect. Everyone wanted this thing moving along quickly. Law's machinery moves swiftly in footpad murder. Alleged slayers of Dr. Kotkov quickly indicted. Four on trial today over Woodhaven murder. So that went from 49 days from the day of the attack to the first day of the trial was 49 days. That's fast. That's fast, right? And it was full of drama. The wife, Anna, made a tremendously effective witness. She came up and she talked about her husband, and she identified some of the items that were stolen off of him, and she actually collapsed in tears and had to be helped from the court. Meanwhile, the first one on trial was the youngest one, the 17-year-old, Peter Nunziata. And as you can see here by the headline, he really didn't make a positive impact on the jury. Youth tried for Woodhaven killing tries to puff cigarette in court. Nunziata yawns as though bored as jury boxes filled in Kotkov's slaying case. So, this kid was, you can see they gave him a nice haircut and they dressed him up there, but he was acting up. He was acting up, and they said his own lawyer had to have a talking to him because he was making faces, and that's not good. The jury sees that. That's not good. They also had an eyewitness. Woodhaven woman saw teacher murdered. I mean, look at the headlines in this. This is just I'm picking the Long Island Daily Press here, but all up and down the East Coast, the newspapers were picking this up. This was big news. Woodhaven woman saw teacher murdered. So there was actually a witness to this, and it was during her testimony that you can see the murder victim's wife, hysterical at trial, is carried from court. Mrs. Kotkov breaks down on witness stand at recital of husband's killing. And here are the 2 children. He had a 1-year-old and a 6-year-old. Cute kids. What a shame. So here's the star witness. Here's the witness, Mrs. Eckhoff. So going back to our map, we see where he gets off the train, and then the little shortcut he takes to get to his house, and you see in there someplace there's some a bad altercation. Right here, this house right here in the square. This is Mrs. Eckhoff's house. She's got a view right on it. She's the house right on the empty lot. Mrs. Mary Eckhoff, who lives opposite the Liberty Avenue elevated station where the theologian was attacked, was another witness this morning. Mrs. Eckhoff, horror-stricken, had seen from a window of her home Dr. Kotkov beaten by his 4 assailants until he fell unconscious. She saw the 4 bandits start to go through Dr. Kotkov's clothing, and almost fainting, had managed to summon the police by phone. So quick was Mrs. Eckhoff's action that the police arrived in time to make 4 arrests. Mrs. Eckhoff on the stand this morning told the story of the assault. It was Mrs. Eckhoff who identified Nunziata and Alfano as 2 of the assailants of Dr. Kotkov after they had been captured near the scene by a patrolman. So remember those 2 gentlemen, I'm calling them gentlemen, the 2 guys that they brought in to carry the guy into the house, Kotkov into the house. Those 2 guys, Nunziata and Alfonso. Nunziata is a 17-year-old who's on trial right now. She identified them as the ones that beat him. Now, Nunziata had this guy as a defense attorney, Edward J. Riley. Edward J. Riley was a flamboyant figure who wore later on, I guess, in his career after this picture, maybe this was an off day, but they said he always wore like a flower in his lapel and a pinstripe suit. He said he was very, very flamboyant. I couldn't find a picture of that. He was well known as the lawyer for Bruno Hauptmann, who was charged with the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. Now he's the defense attorney, and I'm gonna lay out really quickly his defense against Mrs. Eckhoff here. And I'm telling you up front, don't be mad at me. This was 100 years ago. This was 100 years ago. This was his defense, that women exaggerate. That was his defense. We will refer back to Mrs. Eckhoff's testimony. It may be that her memory, her powers of perception are not of the best. Is it not a fact that women will turn to the last chapter in a book before reading it? There is a certain element of sympathy in women which causes them unintentionally to stretch and exaggerate testimony given at a trial. And viewing her evidence, we assume she acted as merely a woman. If that's your defense, you're in trouble. But this was 100 years ago, so let's see if it'll work. Apparently, it didn't, because next they went with Plan B and said that the police beat Nunziata into a murder confession. See, these guys, when they got arrested and they got brought into the precinct, they started telling all about how this all went down. We were going to rob somebody. We met. This guy made me drink. This guy, they all ended up confessing. But now they're saying, well, there's a witness. So they're saying, well, no, actually, you can't trust her. And the police beat the confession out. That's what they say. The jury didn't buy any of that. Nunziata was found guilty of killing Kotkov, and for that was going to face the electric chair. He was 17 years old at the time, and was the youngest person given the death penalty in New York State. In New York State, faces the chair. And then finally, after he's found guilty and he's facing the chair, he is sentenced to die the week of June 13th. Once they found him guilty, he knew he was dying in the electric chair. But it's different knowing you're going to die in the electric chair someday and knowing you're going to die on that day. And that was an impact there. And you can see youth condemned to die for Woodhaven murder trembles at sentence. 53 days. 53 days it went from the attack to the verdict. They called for speedy justice, and they got it. And then it would be June 13th from the day of the attack, 112 days. from 112 days from the day of the attack to the day that the execution was scheduled. Now, due to appeals and such, the execution, spoiler alert, does not happen on June 13th. So now the second man goes on trial, Alfano. He's got a different lawyer, but this different lawyer kind of tries the same. No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Edward J. Riley actually did defend him as well, and he tried basically the same tactics right there. Charges beating by police forced him to confess, and he was found guilty, and again sentenced to death at the electric chair. So the first two that went to trial, they fought it, said the police beat confessions out of us, were found guilty, and sentenced to die in the electric chair. Nunziata hears on his 19th birthday he must die in the chair. So it's later on that he finds out that he actually is now it's done. He's running out of appeals. Meanwhile, the other two guys, when they see what happened with Nunziata and Alfano, the two of them plead guilty. They cut a deal. Both of them plead guilty so that they don't go to the chair, and they received sentences and were spared execution. So now we're into the next year, and Nunziata has run out of options, and his he goes to the chair. There's actually a very interesting story here. A subheadline here: buys last meal for Japanese pal in the death house. While he was in there, there was a Japanese sailor who had gotten into an altercation in a bar and killed somebody. And he was arrested, and he was being executed the same night as Nunziata, and the two of them became friendly, and he ended up buying his pal the last meal, so they became friendly. It's just an interesting little story there. So Nunziata stolidly goes to his death in Sing Sing chair. His last hours. Nunziata was visited in the death house yesterday for the last time by his parents and other members of the family who came in from their home in Williamsburg. None of Nunziata's relatives were permitted to embrace him or touch him in any way. There was a heavy mesh screen that was keeping the visitors a foot away from the cell door. He wouldn't eat any food. It says here, actually, right before he was let out, 20 minutes before he asked for a cup of coffee to help him get ready for the ordeal. What happened was his family brought in a ton of food, and I don't know how you prepare for something like this, but they brought in a lot of food, and he didn't eat any of it. He didn't want any of it. And instead, he asked them and asked the warden if they would take the food and distribute it amongst all the other death row inmates. And that's what they did. He ended up just having a cup of coffee for his last meal. Said he seemed to be deeply affected when his parents, how much grief they were in when he was told that it was time for them to go. He tried to comfort them, and he told them he was glad his troubles would soon be over. I am ready, he said, resolutely, when his cell was unlocked. While the priest was droning the last prayers, Nunziata kissed his crucifix, which he held tightly in his hand. The steel headpiece was placed over the youth's head, and the black leather mask was adjusted. At a signal, Dr. Amos Squires, the prison physician, the crashing force of the electric current was sent through Nunziata's body. The heavy switch was held on only a minute and a quarter and was cut off, the two physicians stepping forward after Nunziata's chest was bared and applying the stethoscopes. Once more, the current was turned on. It's time for only 20 seconds. Another examination, and Dr. Squires stepped back and said, I pronounce this man dead. He was resigned to his fate, it says. he just wanted this over at this point. It had been hanging over his head, obviously, and that's where he went. Old Sparky, they call it. There's the chair he died in. Old Sparky. And now, a little bit less than a year later, Alfano. Alfano is put to death in Sing Sing, and that's two. That's two. And again, he doesn't take any food. He says, "Hey, I'm ready to die." So, out of the four that were arrested for the crime, Nunziata was executed. Alfano was executed the year after. Casesa, he worked out a great deal for himself. And a lot of this was because they felt these guys were lesser involved. But Casesa, 8 to 16 years. And Alphonse Verona was sentenced to 20 years to life. They both ended up getting out on parole. And nothing is known of what happened to Casesa. Alphonse Verona got out and moved to Richmond Hill. He passed away in the 1950s. Nothing else is known about him, what he did or whatever. And that is the end. That is the end of the presentation there. Professor Kotkov is his wife remarried. He is buried in Cypress Hills. I have been there twice looking for his grave, and I have not found it yet. But if you know Mr. Alan Smith from Woodhaven and the Woodhaven Cultural Historical Society, he went there and found it. So he's going to take me there one day, or I'll go back and keep on looking until I find it. But in any event, I'm going to stop the share here.